He saved an Apache woman from certain death. Then her tribe did something that changed his life. Ever since he was a boy, he loved the sound of wind rushing through the trees, the smell of fresh earth after rain, and the quiet whispers of rivers carving their paths through the land. Life in the small frontier town he grew up in was predictable and safe, but the forests and canyons called to him. By the time he was in his mid-20s, he had become an experienced explorer, skilled at navigating rough terrains, reading animal tracks, and surviving in the wilderness. Yet, even with all his experience, he knew that nature could be unforgiving. One late afternoon, John decided to explore a narrow canyon on the outskirts of the territory. He had heard stories about it from the older settlers, how storms sometimes caused sudden rockslides and how dangerous it could be if one ventured alone. But he was confident. He packed lightly, bringing only a small bag with some bread, dried meat, a canteen of water, and his trusted knife. His horse followed behind, patient and steady, as John carefully made his way along the uneven trail. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the canyon walls. As he rounded a bend, he noticed something unusual. A thin cloud of dust hung in the air, and there was a faint, sharp sound that made him pause. It was a sound he had never heard before, a mix of cries and the scraping of rocks. His heart began to beat faster, and instinctively he slowed his pace. The canyon was quiet most of the time, but this was different. This was the sound of someone in trouble. Without thinking twice, he urged his horse forward, following the noise. John's eyes scanned the rocky cliffs. Then he saw her, a woman struggling beneath a pile of fallen rocks. Her dark hair was tangled with dirt, and she was desperately trying to lift the stones, but they were too heavy. John could see the fear in her eyes, and something inside him stirred. He didn't know who she was or why she was there, but he knew he couldn't leave her. He dismounted and ran toward her, slipping on loose stones as he went. The closer he got, the more he realized the danger. A small landslide had clearly occurred, and more rocks were precariously balanced above her. Any wrong move could trigger another fall. But John's mind was clear. He positioned himself carefully, testing the weight of a rock with his hands. With a deep breath, he heaved with all his strength. Inch by inch, the stones began to move, and soon, enough space was cleared for the woman to crawl out. She collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. John quickly offered her water from his canteen. "Are you hurt badly?" he asked. She didn't answer at first, just shook her head slightly, still wary of him. Her eyes darted around, alert and cautious, as if she expected danger to come from every direction. John noticed the markings on her clothing, distinct patterns he had never seen before. They were not European or settler designs. Something told him she belonged to one of the tribes living nearby. "Don't worry," John said gently. "You're safe now. I'll help you." He helped her sit up and examined her carefully. She had some bruises and scratches from the rocks, but nothing life-threatening. Still, she winced as he touched her arm. He could tell she was in pain, but her bravery was evident in the way she held herself upright despite it all. For a moment, there was silence between them. John tried to think of what to say, how to make her understand that he meant no harm. Then she spoke, her voice low and cautious. It was in a language he did not understand, filled with sharp, melodic sounds. He smiled gently, hoping his tone would convey trust. "It's okay," he said, pointing to the water. She nodded slowly and drank, her hands shaking slightly. John realized that rescuing her was only the beginning. They were still in a dangerous place. The canyon could be treacherous, especially as darkness fell. Loose rocks, steep cliffs, and wild animals all posed threats. He helped her to her feet and guided her carefully along the narrow trail. She followed his lead, still hesitant, but gradually gaining confidence in his guidance. Every step was cautious, deliberate, but John's determination never wavered. He could feel her trembling, but he could also sense a growing trust. As they moved deeper into the canyon, John began to notice more about her. She was strong and agile, even with injuries, moving with a careful precision that spoke of survival skills. Her eyes, dark and alert, scanned the surroundings constantly. John admired her resilience. She was a stranger, but there was something about her courage that inspired him. Night was approaching, and the shadows of the canyon grew longer. John knew they needed shelter. He spotted a small overhang nearby and led her there. Using some fallen branches and his blanket, he managed to create a simple, safe space for them to rest. She sat quietly, still unsure of him, while he prepared a small fire. The warmth of the flames cut through the chill, and the soft crackle of burning wood made the canyon feel less ominous. John offered her some food, breaking pieces of bread and meat and handing them to her. She accepted cautiously, eating slowly as if every bite was a test of his intentions. He watched her carefully, making sure she was comfortable. Over the next few hours, they didn't speak much, but a quiet understanding grew between them. She no longer seemed as fearful, and he felt a deep sense of responsibility for her safety. During the night, John kept watch, listening to the sounds of the canyon. The wind whispered through the rocks, and distant animal calls echoed across the cliffs. He couldn't sleep, not fully. His mind kept returning to the moment he found her, the terror in her eyes, the helplessness of being trapped beneath rocks. He had saved her life, yes, but he knew the real challenge had only just begun. How would he ensure she returned safely to her people? How would he earn their trust? These questions lingered as the fire's glow danced across the rocky walls. By the first light of dawn, John felt a quiet determination. He had made a promise, even silently, to protect her. He helped her up, checking her injuries again, and carefully planned their path out of the canyon. Every step required patience, every move demanded caution, but he was committed. The bond between them was unspoken, a fragile trust formed in the face of danger and uncertainty. As they reached the edge of the canyon, John paused to look at her. She looked back, her eyes no longer filled with fear but with cautious respect. He knew their journey was far from over, but that moment marked the beginning of something extraordinary. He had saved a life, but in doing so, he had unknowingly stepped into a world of mystery, culture, and honor that would soon change his own life forever. After leaving the safety of the canyon, John and the woman, whose name he had learned was Naeli, began the slow journey toward her village. The sun was higher now, and the world around them was alive with the sounds of birds, rustling leaves, and distant flowing streams. Every step brought new challenges, rocks that seemed too steep to climb, narrow paths that ran along cliffs, and thorny bushes that tore at their clothes as they moved through the forest. John moved carefully, guiding Naeli over each obstacle and constantly scanning the surroundings for danger. Despite the beauty of the landscape, John could sense the tension growing. He had saved Naeli from the landslide, but he was aware that outsiders, especially settlers like him, were not always welcomed by the tribes. The Apache, known for their courage and strict adherence to their traditions, could view interference from strangers with suspicion. Every crack of a branch, every rustle in the brush made John pause, aware that one wrong move could be misinterpreted. Naeli moved beside him with quiet confidence, but he could feel her vigilance as well. She had survived in the wild before, and she knew that danger could come from more than just the terrain. It could come from people. As they walked, John tried to speak with her, using simple words and gestures to communicate. He wanted to understand more about her life and where she was from. Naeli's eyes softened slightly when he spoke, but she remained cautious. She gestured to her arm and then to his water, showing her gratitude for his help. John nodded, understanding her appreciation even without fully comprehending her words. He realized that sometimes actions spoke louder than language, and every careful step he took to protect her strengthened the trust between them. Hours passed and the journey became more demanding. The paths grew narrower and the trees thicker, blocking out the sunlight. John noticed faint signs of her tribe, the markings on trees, small clearings where fires had been lit, and the subtle footprints of people moving through the forest. He felt a mixture of relief and nervousness. They were close now, but the closer they got to her people, the more uncertain the situation became. Would they welcome him as a friend or see him as a threat? At one point, Naeli paused and crouched beside a small stream, washing the dirt and dust from her face. She looked exhausted, her clothes torn from the journey, but she was determined to continue. John handed her a piece of bread and water, trying to offer comfort. She smiled faintly, and for a moment the weight of fear lifted from her expression. John realized that their shared struggle had created a silent bond between them. He had risked his life to save hers, and now, without words, he understood that she trusted him to help her return safely to her people. As the day wore on, the shadows grew longer, and John began to think about where they would rest for the night. He knew the forest could be dangerous after dark, with wild animals roaming and visibility low. He suggested they find a safe spot before the sun disappeared completely. Naeli nodded, scanning the area with practiced attention. Finally, they found a small clearing, sheltered by trees and rocks. John quickly gathered branches and leaves to make a simple bed, and soon, a small fire flickered to life. The warmth was comforting, and the flames cast dancing shadows that made the forest feel less threatening. While Naeli rested, John kept watch. He thought about the day's events, the landslide, her initial fear, and the careful journey through the forest. Saving her had been instinctive, a simple act of humanity, but now he realized the complexity of the situation. He had stepped into a world he barely understood, a world with rules and customs he had never learned. He knew that Naeli's tribe might not easily accept him, and yet he was determined to see her safely home. His mind wandered to the stories he had heard about the Apache people, stories of bravery, honor, and strict adherence to their traditions. He wondered how they would react to a stranger who had intervened in one of their own. That night, under the soft glow of the fire, John noticed Naeli staring into the flames, lost in thought. He could sense that she was worried about how her people would receive them. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but firm, using a few words that John did not understand. He listened carefully, trying to interpret her tone and gestures. She seemed to be explaining something important, perhaps warning him about the tribe's rules or expressing concern about his safety. John nodded, acknowledging her caution, and smiled gently. He wanted her to know that he understood, even if he could not grasp every word. The next morning, they resumed their journey. The forest gradually gave way to open plains, and John could see the smoke of small fires in the distance, a sign that they were nearing her village. The sight brought a mix of relief and anxiety. They were close, but John knew that the hardest part of the journey lay ahead. Entering the village would require courage, respect, and patience. He could not simply walk in and hope to be accepted. He had to demonstrate his intentions clearly. Naeli, sensing his thoughts, took his hand briefly, a silent gesture of reassurance. John squeezed it gently, grateful for her trust. As they approached the edge of the village, John observed the people cautiously. Apache men and women moved with purpose, their eyes alert and observant. Children played nearby, and elders watched from the shadows of the huts. The moment was tense, and John felt a knot of uncertainty in his stomach. He knew that a single misstep could ruin everything. He slowed his pace, letting Naeli guide him, and tried to project calm and respect in every movement. When they finally reached the center of the village, an elder stepped forward, his gaze sharp and unwavering. John stopped and bowed slightly, hoping his gesture would convey respect. The elder's eyes studied him carefully, and for a moment, silence hung in the air. Naeli stepped forward, speaking quickly in her language, explaining who John was and what he had done. John listened as best he could, catching glimpses of words that hinted at gratitude but also caution. He remained still, letting her words speak on his behalf. The elder finally nodded, but his expression remained serious. John understood that trust could not be demanded, it had to be earned. Over the next few hours, he shared simple tasks with the villagers, helping where he could. He carried water, gathered firewood, and assisted with small chores. Naeli stayed close, explaining his actions to the others. Gradually, the tension in the air eased. The villagers began to see that he meant no harm and that his intentions were genuine. By evening, John was invited to sit near the elders, a gesture that signaled the beginning of acceptance. He felt a mixture of relief and pride, but he also knew that his journey with Naeli and her tribe was far from over. There were still rules to learn, traditions to respect, and trust to fully earn. Yet, for the first time, he allowed himself to hope that his act of courage, the decision to save a stranger in danger, might lead to something far greater than he had imagined. As night fell, John reflected on the day's events. Saving Naeli had been instinctive, but accompanying her to her village had required patience, courage, and respect for a culture he barely understood. He realized that bravery was not only about facing physical danger, but also about navigating the unknown with honor. The bond between him and Naeli had grown stronger, founded on mutual trust and shared experience. He knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, and that the journey they had begun would change both of their lives forever. The morning sun rose gently over the village, casting long golden rays across the small huts and open spaces where the Apache people went about their daily routines. John woke early, feeling the cool air of the plains brushing against his face. Last night had been a strange mixture of relief and unease. While some of the villagers had begun to accept him, there were still others whose eyes watched him closely, filled with suspicion. He knew that their trust had to be earned, and that even a small mistake could make things far more difficult for both him and Naeli. After a simple breakfast, John helped gather water from the nearby stream. The villagers moved around him with quiet observation, their faces calm but watchful. Naeli walked beside him, speaking softly in her language to the others, explaining his intentions and reassuring them that he had only come to help. John noticed the care in her tone. She had risked her reputation to defend him, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect for her courage. He knew that without her support, he might have been turned away, or worse. The elders called a meeting in the central clearing, where villagers of all ages gathered. The air was tense. John could feel the weight of their gaze on him. He knew that what happened in this meeting could determine the rest of his time in the village, and even affect Naeli's standing with her people. The head elder, a tall man with sharp eyes and a deep, commanding voice, stepped forward. He spoke slowly in their language, and Naeli translated for John as best she could. The elder's words were careful, respectful, but firm. They wanted to understand why John had intervened in a situation that involved one of their own. John spoke honestly, choosing his words with care. He explained how he had been exploring the canyon when he heard cries for help. He described how he had seen Naeli trapped under the rocks and how he could not leave her to die. He emphasized that he had no intention to harm her or interfere with her people, only to save a life. His voice was steady, and he looked directly at the elder, showing respect and sincerity. For a long moment, silence followed. The villagers whispered among themselves, evaluating his words, judging his character. Naeli stepped closer, speaking earnestly about how he had saved her, how he had risked himself without asking for anything in return. She described the fear she had felt and how his courage had given her hope. John felt a strange mixture of nervousness and hope. He had no control over their response now, All he could do was wait and continue to show respect. The elder finally spoke again, and this time his tone had softened slightly. He asked John questions about his life, his experiences, and his intentions. John answered patiently, sharing stories of the land, the wilderness, and the skills he had learned over the years. He emphasized that he understood the value of life, respect, and honor, concepts that he sensed were deeply important to the tribe. Naeli translated carefully, making sure each word was conveyed with the proper nuance. Some villagers began to nod subtly, while others remained skeptical. John realized that winning their trust would take time, and he resolved to prove himself not just through words, but through actions. He offered to help with daily tasks, assisting elders in gathering food, repairing structures, and carrying supplies. Every small action was noticed, and slowly the tension began to ease. Villagers who had been wary started to observe him more closely, and some even offered him small smiles of encouragement. Despite the gradual acceptance, John could see that not everyone was convinced. A few warriors watched him with folded arms, their expressions guarded. He knew he could not force their trust. He could only continue to act with honesty, courage, and humility. He reminded himself that respect had to be earned, especially in a culture that valued honor and tradition above all else. Naeli remained by his side, often offering silent reassurance with a glance or a gentle touch, reminding him that he was not alone in this journey. As the day passed, John observed the daily life of the village more closely. He saw how the Apache people valued community, sharing responsibilities and looking after each other. Children learned the skills of survival from elders, practicing hunting, tracking, and understanding the land. Women tended to food, medicine, and crafts, showing great skill and knowledge. John felt both admiration and humility. He realized that while he had thought of himself as independent and capable in the wilderness, there was a depth of knowledge and strength in this community that he had never encountered before. In the afternoon, the elder called John aside. They walked to a quiet area near the edge of the village, where the sounds of daily life were muted. The elder spoke slowly, choosing each word carefully. He acknowledged that John's actions had been brave and that his intentions were clear. However, he reminded John that actions outside the tribe's knowledge could have consequences. Trust had to be maintained, and respect for their customs was essential. John listened intently, nodding with understanding. He promised to honor their ways and follow their guidance, realizing that respect was more important than anything else he could offer. Over the next few days, John continued to help the villagers. He assisted in gathering firewood, repairing shelters, and preparing food. Each task was an opportunity to demonstrate his respect and commitment. Naeli introduced him to other members of her tribe, helping him navigate social dynamics and teaching him small customs and gestures that showed understanding and consideration. John listened carefully, learning quickly, and gradually felt less like an outsider and more like a part of their world. Despite the growing acceptance, John noticed subtle reminders that he was still an outsider. Some villagers spoke in hushed tones when he was near, while others observed him from a distance. He realized that gaining full trust would require patience and time. He accepted this challenge willingly, understanding that true respect and friendship were earned, not demanded. Naeli remained his guide and support, often explaining the significance of certain actions and rituals, helping him avoid misunderstandings that could jeopardize their progress. One evening, a ceremony was held in the village to honor recent acts of bravery and contributions to the community. John observed quietly from a distance, unsure if he would be included. Naeli approached him, smiling gently, and whispered that the elders wanted him to witness the ceremony. As the villagers gathered, chanting softly and performing traditional movements, John felt a deep sense of connection. He understood that this ceremony was not only a celebration of courage, but also a way to reinforce bonds, respect, and trust within the community. John watched as Nayeli participated, her movements graceful and confident, reflecting both her personal strength and her role within the tribe. He felt inspired by her courage and resilience. She had endured fear, danger, and uncertainty, yet she moved with dignity and focus. Her presence reminded John of the responsibility he carried, not only to her, but to the trust that was slowly being placed in him by her people. After the ceremony, some villagers approached John, offering small gestures of friendship, sharing food, offering a hand in greeting, or simply smiling. Each gesture was meaningful, and John accepted them with gratitude and respect. He realized that while he had saved a life, the journey had become about so much more. It was about understanding, trust, and building bridges between two worlds that had once seemed separate. By the time night fell, John reflected on the events of the day. He had faced challenges he had never imagined, navigating not only the wilderness but also the complexities of a culture different from his own. He had learned patience, humility, and the importance of listening before acting. Nayeli sat beside him, her presence a comforting reminder of the trust and bond they had formed. Together, they looked up at the stars, feeling a quiet sense of hope and anticipation for what was yet to come. John knew that the days ahead would bring more challenges, but he also understood that each challenge was an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to demonstrate his commitment to honor, courage, and respect. He had saved Nayeli's life, but in doing so, he had entered a world filled with wisdom, tradition, and human connection. He felt a quiet gratitude, knowing that this experience was shaping him in ways he had never expected. As the village settled into the calm of the night, John remained alert yet at peace. He had taken the first steps toward earning the full trust of the tribe, and he knew that the journey was far from over. But for the first time, he felt a deep sense of purpose, a recognition that bravery was not only about facing danger, but also about understanding, respecting, and connecting with others. He had entered a world unknown, and it was already beginning to change him in profound and lasting ways. The days in the Apache village passed slowly but meaningfully for John. Each morning he rose with the sun, helping to fetch water from the stream or gather firewood from the forest. He watched the children practice their hunting skills, the elders teach wisdom, and the women work with incredible skill on food, medicine, and crafts. John had grown to admire the balance in their community, the way every action was purposeful, every person had a role, and respect was given to those who earned it. He felt grateful for the chance to be part of it, even if only temporarily. Yet John knew that acceptance was still fragile. Though some villagers had warmed to him, others remained cautious, observing his every move. He understood that the next challenge would come not from the land, but from the people themselves. And indeed, one morning, that challenge arrived. The village elder called John and Nayeli to the central clearing, where a larger gathering of the community awaited. A hush fell over the crowd as they approached, the weight of expectation palpable in the air. John's heart pounded, not with fear of physical danger, but with the pressure of uncertainty. How would the tribe respond to a stranger who had intervened in the life of one of their own? The elder's eyes met John's, sharp and penetrating, yet filled with curiosity rather than anger. He spoke slowly and Nayeli translated carefully. "You have saved our daughter," she said, gesturing toward John. "You risked your life for hers, that is known. But your presence here is unusual. Outsiders rarely enter our ways without purpose. We must understand your heart and decide how you may remain among us." John stepped forward, his hands open in a gesture of peace. He spoke honestly, telling the story of the canyon, the landslide, and how he could not leave Nayeli trapped beneath the rocks. He emphasized that he had acted out of instinct and compassion, and that his only wish was to ensure her safety. He did not ask for praise or reward, only to be trusted to do right. His voice was calm, steady, and full of sincerity. The villagers listened intently, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. Some whispered among themselves, while others remained silent, observing closely. Naomi stayed beside John, her eyes full of quiet encouragement. John realized that she had risked her reputation by supporting him, and he felt a surge of responsibility, not just to her, but to honor the trust she had placed in him. After a long pause, the elder motioned for John and Naomi to sit. He spoke again, this time with a tone that carried authority and thoughtfulness. "Courage alone does not earn a place among our people," he said. "Respect for our ways and understanding of our traditions are equally important. You have shown courage, John. But will you show humility, patience, and honor? These qualities will decide your fate among us." John nodded, fully aware of the challenge ahead. He understood that proving himself would require more than words or deeds. It would require a true understanding of the values the tribe held dear. Over the next several days, he dedicated himself to learning. Naomi taught him small rituals and customs, explaining their meaning and importance. John observed every detail, asking questions and practicing diligently. He learned how to move quietly through the forest, how to respect sacred areas, and how to show gratitude for the land and the people who lived in harmony with it. Meanwhile, the other villagers began to observe him in different situations, helping with chores, assisting in hunting, and participating in communal tasks. John approached each activity with care and sincerity, determined to show that his intentions were pure. Slowly, the murmurs of skepticism began to fade. Villagers who had once watched him warily now offered small gestures of acknowledgement, a nod, a smile, or a brief word of encouragement. John understood that acceptance could not be forced. It had to be earned through consistent action and genuine respect. One afternoon, a situation arose that tested his courage once again. A young boy had wandered too close to a cliff while playing, unaware of the danger. John noticed immediately and reacted without hesitation. He sprinted forward, scooping the child up just before he slipped over the edge. The villagers gasped, their expressions a mixture of relief and admiration. Naomi ran to the boy, hugging him tightly and whispering comforting words. John felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, not pride but deep fulfillment. His actions had saved a life once more, and this time, the villagers could see firsthand that his intentions were honorable. That evening, the elder called John aside again. "You have shown courage, wisdom, and respect," he said, his voice carrying both authority and warmth. "Your heart is true, and your actions have proven your intentions. You have risked life for others without asking for reward. This is not common among outsiders. For this, you shall be honored." John felt a mixture of surprise, gratitude, and humility. He had acted without expectation, and now the tribe had chosen to recognize him. He knew that this honor was not merely for him, but for the bond he had built with Naomi and the respect he had shown for her people. The following day, the village held a ceremonial gathering. The elders, warriors, and all members of the tribe participated. The ceremony was filled with songs, chants, and movements that John had been learning to understand. It was a celebration of courage, honor, and the bonds that connected individuals to the community. When John was called forward, he felt a mixture of nervousness and awe. The elder placed a handcrafted necklace around his neck, a symbol of respect and recognition. The gesture was simple, yet profound. John understood that he had been welcomed into a circle of trust, that the tribe had acknowledged not only his actions but his heart. Naomi stood beside him, her expression filled with pride and relief. The villagers who had once watched him with suspicion now approached him with smiles and words of friendship. Children reached out to touch the necklace, curious and fascinated, while elders nodded approvingly. John felt a deep sense of belonging that he had never experienced before. He realized that his life had been irrevocably changed, not just by saving Naeli, but by the acceptance and honor he had received from her people. In the days that followed, John continued to integrate into village life. He learned to hunt and gather in ways that respected the land, to participate in rituals with mindfulness, and to contribute to the community in meaningful ways. Each day brought new lessons, challenges, and opportunities to demonstrate his commitment. He felt a sense of peace and purpose he had never known, grounded in the trust and connection he had built with the tribe. Through it all, John and Naeli's bond grew stronger. Their shared experiences, the dangers of the canyon, the journey to her village, and the challenges of gaining trust, had created a foundation of mutual respect, understanding, and quiet friendship. John admired her strength, wisdom, and courage, while Naeli appreciated his sincerity, humility, and unwavering commitment to doing what was right. Together, they had navigated uncertainty, fear, and cultural divides, emerging stronger and more connected than ever. John reflected on the events that had brought him to this point. Saving a life in a moment of instinct had led to a journey of learning, understanding, and profound transformation. He realized that courage was not only measured by physical bravery, but by the willingness to respect others, to listen, and to act with integrity. The tribe had not only accepted him, they had shown him a new way of seeing the world, a way grounded in honor, trust, and community. As the sun set over the village, casting warm colors across the plains, John stood quietly, looking at the people around him. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the trust he had been given and the lessons he had learned. He knew that life would never be the same again. The experiences he had shared with Naeli and her tribe had opened his heart to new understanding, new respect, and a new way of living. He had entered their world as an outsider, but he now felt a part of it, bound by courage, trust, and honor. For the first time in his life, John understood that some acts of bravery, like saving a life, could lead to outcomes far beyond expectation. What had begun as a single act of compassion had grown into a journey of transformation, connection, and recognition that would shape his life forever. The tribe's decision to honor him was more than a reward. It was a symbol of trust, respect, and the power of human kindness. As night fell and the village settled into quiet, John felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced dangers, navigated cultural divides, and proven himself through courage and humility. He had earned a place in a world that had once seemed foreign and impenetrable. And in doing so, he had discovered something even more valuable, a connection to humanity, a bond of trust and respect, and a new understanding of what it truly meant to act with courage and honor. The days after the ceremony passed with a comforting rhythm. John had found a place in the village that felt both foreign and familiar. He woke each morning with purpose, helping the community where he could, learning new skills from the elders, and observing the intricate balance of life in the tribe. Each task he completed, from gathering water to assisting in food preparation, was a small reminder of how much he had grown since that first fateful day in the canyon. But more than anything, John cherished the bond he had formed with Naeli. She had been his guide, his translator, and his friend, and through her, he had come to understand the richness of her culture and the strength of her people. John often reflected on the journey that had brought him here. It had begun with a single, instinctive act of courage, saving Naeli from the landslide. At the time, he had thought little of it, simply responding to what he saw as immediate danger. Yet, that one decision had led him on a path he could never have imagined. He had faced uncertainty, suspicion, and the challenge of entering a world completely different from his own. He had been tested not just by the wilderness, but by the people he wished to help. And now, after weeks of living among them, learning their ways and earning their trust, he felt a deep sense of accomplishment and belonging. The village itself had become a place of learning and reflection for John. He watched the elders teach the younger generation how to hunt, track, and live in harmony with the land. He helped where he could, always careful to respect their traditions and observe their customs. John realized that these lessons were not just practical, they were also lessons in patience, humility, and understanding. Every interaction, every task, and every conversation taught him something new about courage and respect. He began to see the world through their eyes, appreciating the balance they maintained between survival, honor, and community. Nayeli, too, had grown closer to him. She often spoke to him quietly, explaining the meanings behind customs, rituals, and daily practices. Through her guidance, John learned to move with sensitivity and awareness, understanding that even small gestures could hold deep significance. Their friendship had developed in a space of mutual respect, shaped by shared experiences and trust. John admired her strength, wisdom, and unwavering courage, while Nayeli valued his sincerity, honesty, and determination to do what was right. Together, they had navigated challenges that neither could have faced alone, and in the process, they had built a bond that transcended words. One morning, a messenger arrived from a neighboring settlement, bringing news that reminded John of the world he had left behind. Traders and travelers had reported stories of a frontiersman who had saved a woman from the Apache tribe and earned their respect. The tale had spread, capturing attention far beyond the village. John listened quietly, aware that his story had taken on a life of its own. He did not seek fame or recognition. He had acted out of compassion, instinct, and a sense of duty. Yet, hearing of the story's reach filled him with a humble pride. He realized that even small acts of courage could have far-reaching effects, inspiring others and bridging gaps between cultures. As the days turned into weeks, John found himself reflecting more deeply on the lessons he had learned. He had come to understand that bravery was not only about facing danger, but also about acting with integrity, humility, and respect. True courage, he realized, was measured not by physical strength alone, but by the willingness to enter the unknown, listen, and learn. His experiences with Nayeli and the tribe had taught him that human connection and trust were among the most powerful forces in the world, capable of transforming lives in ways no single action alone could achieve. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, John walked with Nayeli to a high point overlooking the village. The air was cool, filled with the scent of wildflowers and the distant hum of the river. They stood in silence, watching the village settle into the calm of twilight. John thought of how far he had come, from a man wandering the wilderness, reacting instinctively to danger, to someone fully immersed in a community that had once seemed completely foreign. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for the trust and acceptance he had received, and for the lessons that had shaped him along the way. Nayeli turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "You have learned much," she said softly, her voice carrying warmth and sincerity. "You have shown courage, respect, and honor. You have not only saved a life, but you have also touched our hearts." John smiled, feeling the weight of her words. He understood that his journey had never been just about survival. It had been about connection, understanding, and the way one person's actions could influence many. In the weeks that followed, John continued to live and work alongside the villagers. He participated in their ceremonies, learned their skills, and helped teach others some of his own knowledge about the wilderness. He discovered that learning was never-ending, and that each day offered an opportunity to grow and understand more deeply. He also found moments of quiet reflection, sitting by the river or walking through the forest, thinking about the events that had brought him here and the people who had shaped his journey. Eventually, the time came when John knew he would have to leave the village. He had responsibilities in his own world, and the wilderness still called to him. Yet, he no longer feared the unknown. He had learned that courage was not just about confronting danger. It was about facing life with openness, respect, and understanding. He had learned to trust himself, to trust others, and to appreciate the strength of human connection. The farewell was bittersweet. The villagers gathered to see him off, offering gestures of friendship, small gifts, and words of encouragement. The elders blessed him for the journey ahead, recognizing his courage and the lessons he had learned. Naomi stood beside him, her expression a mixture of pride and sadness. John took her hand, grateful for her guidance, support, and friendship. "I will never forget what you and your people have taught me," he said softly. Naomi nodded, understanding the depth of his words. As John walked away from the village, he felt a profound sense of transformation. The experience had changed him in ways he could never have predicted. He had come seeking only to act with courage, but he had gained wisdom, friendship, and a deeper understanding of humanity. He knew that the lessons of respect, patience, and humility would stay with him for the rest of his life. He also carried with him the memory of Naomi's bravery and the warmth of the tribe that had embraced him as one of their own. Over the years, John would recount the story to those who asked, not as a tale of personal heroism, but as a story of trust, courage, and the power of human kindness. He would speak of the woman he had saved, the tribe that had challenged him, and the lessons that had changed his life forever. His story became an inspiration, showing that even the simplest acts of compassion, when carried out with honesty and integrity, could create ripples of understanding and connection that extended far beyond what anyone could imagine. John often returned to the wilderness, exploring the forests and mountains he had always loved. But he no longer wandered alone. He carried the memory of Naomi and her people with him, and it influenced the way he approached every challenge and every encounter. He had learned to see the world not just through his own eyes, but through the eyes of others, to recognize courage in many forms and to honor the bonds that connected all people. In quiet moments, he would think back to that fateful day in the canyon when he had first seen Naomi trapped beneath the rocks. He remembered the fear, the urgency, and the instinctive choice to act. At the time, he had not known that this single decision would open the door to an entirely new world. He realized now that life's most profound lessons often came from unexpected moments, from choices made with courage and compassion, and from the trust that others placed in us. By the time he reached the outskirts of the village for the final time, John felt a deep sense of peace. He knew that he had been forever changed, not by the dangers he had faced, but by the people he had met, the bonds he had formed, and the understanding he had gained. He walked with a steady heart and an open mind, ready to carry the lessons of courage, respect, and honor into the rest of his life. And as the sun set behind him, casting long shadows across the plains, John knew that he had not only saved a life, he had been given a gift in return. The tribe's trust, Naomi's friendship, and the lessons of a people who lived with courage, respect, and honor had transformed him completely. He realized that life was full of unexpected journeys, and that sometimes the greatest adventures were not those of the wilderness, but of the heart.